guys, Ariel over here at Fine Knit. This afternoon I'm going to bake a chocolate applesauce cake. This cake is a good one if you're not a big normal cake fan, which would be me. I don't like dry cakey cakes, just never have personally, but this is really moist, and that's because of the applesauce in there. It does not taste like apples at all, it tastes like chocolate, so if you like chocolate, that's a good thing. If you don't, you won't like this. But it doesn't taste like apples whether you do or you don't like apples. So, this is a pretty simple recipe. Everyone I've ever served this to has absolutely loved it. I've got 1 stick of butter, and this is not a particularly extra healthy cake. As far as desserts go, it's probably not a particularly extra unhealthy one, but this would be a dessert that I would eat sparingly, and I usually make it for other people. So I'm doing 1 stick of butter, 1.5 cups of sugar, 2 cups of applesauce. I'm not going to measure this because that's about 1/2 quart in there, so it's going to be a little bit more than 2 cups, but that's okay. My butter's been sitting out here on the counter, so it's pretty soft. Mix that into my sugar just a little bit before adding the applesauce. And you could melt the butter the whole way for this cake recipe. I haven't found that it really makes a difference. You could put this in a mixer like my KitchenAid, or use a little hand mixer if you wanted, but if your butter's soft, it's not that hard to just do with a fork, and then you don't have anything else to clean up. So now I'm doing 2 cups of applesauce, a little bit on the generous side. This is applesauce I made with apples from my new property, actually, last fall. But applesauce is super easy to make. If you've never made it, maybe next fall when it's time to do that again, I'll have to do a video on that. So the applesauce is going to give you a lot of the total bulk of the cake and help keep it really moist. And I need 2 eggs. If you don't spend a lot of time cracking eggs, it's not a bad idea to crack them into a separate dish first to be sure you don't get eggshells in what you're doing. Not that I'm infallible and couldn't do that, but I've done this a lot and I don't usually have a problem. So now I'm just going to mix my eggs and applesauce into the butter and sugar. This gives me all my wet ingredients. There we go. And now I'm going to be adding the dry ingredients, and that's kind of the basic way you start out for most any bake thing. You mix your wet ingredients first and then your dry. Now I've got 2 cups of flour here already measured out. The only reason I poured it in there is because I was using up a bunch of little bags of some odds and ends of that's coconut flour and rice flour and several mixed together, and I was trying to see if I needed more or if that was going to do the trick. So there's no reason to not measure it directly into here, and there's no reason you can't use regular wheat flour if you like. My body doesn't seem to tolerate very well, so I'm usually doing some other kind of flour, but just about any version of flour will work. Now we've got some baking soda. Need about 1.5 teaspoons of that. I'm gonna call that good. Need a little bit of salt. My real salt here, that's why it looks all dirty. About 1/2 teaspoon. There we go. And cocoa powder. This, it says 2 tablespoons. I like chocolate, so I'm going a little heavy on that for sure. Cocoa powder tends to pack in here after a little bit. So I know that's more than 2 tablespoons, but I like the chocolate flavor. And now we're just going to mix the dry ingredients into the wet there. turn it all a chocolatey brown here as the cocoa powder gets moistened. This is super quick to whip up. Growing up, didn't even realize that things like cakes could be made from a box. I just, came from a household where we did everything from scratch. And so I was, 20 before I even really was aware that people did that. But it's so easy and quick to mix them up yourself. And it's so, there's not all the preservatives and stuff that are in the cake mixes. I guess I don't really know why anybody does a box mix. That. It's actually a little thick. I think my coconut flour absorbs moisture a little bit more than a lot of other kinds of flours. I'm actually going to add a little bit more egg in there because I want that to be a little more moist. I'm actually going to do 2 more eggs, or I could do a little more applesauce or whatever else. This is the fun of cooking. You can kind of experiment with all kinds of different things and make whatever you like. It's going to give it a little more protein and such in there as well. Mix that in. And I've found that before when using mostly coconut flour for some replacements, it seems a little drier, so I should have probably reduced it and not use quite so much. But if you're using just a wheat flour or even like a gluten-free flour substitute mix or something, you probably won't have that problem. I'm going to use a baking dish here. Kept my butter paper because I'm going to use that to grease it. Mostly paying attention to rubbing that into the corners, but a little bit over the sides and bottom as well. But the corners is usually where things, if they're going to stick the most. So there we go. And I'm going to put our cake batter into the pan. Now I'm going to turn my oven on. I just heard it light. This is a propane oven. It's always not a bad idea to double check and make sure it actually did light, but I could hear it. So I'm turning that on to 350. It doesn't take it long at all to warm up, which is why I didn't start it earlier. If you use an electric oven or something, you might want to actually turn it on before you start mixing all the rest of the cake up here, so that it is good and hot. Just going to kind of smooth this batter out just a little bit. And then we've got a little bit, you could just leave it like this, but I've got a little bit of a topping mix that I like to put on here. So I started this already. Got white chocolate chips and chocolate chunks in there. You could do any combo of big chocolate chips, little chocolate chips, dark, milk, white, whatever you like. I actually usually prefer dark, but I had these 2 things left in my cupboard that needed used up from something a while ago, so I thought I'm going to use them for this. So about a cup of some kind of chocolate. I probably went a little generous there because I like chocolate. And about, I think the recipe says half a cup of nuts. I went a little generous here as well. Those are pecans, just chopped up. Mix those 2 together. And then this is mostly just for looks, but if you put just a tiny bit of sugar in with this, like a tablespoon or 2, it gives it kind of a pretty sheen on top of the cake when it is done baking. And that doesn't really to mix well. The sugar all falls through to the bottom. But I'm just going to sprinkle my nut and chocolate chunk mixture across the top of the cake. Usually try to start with the edges first, because by the time you get those done, you usually have gotten the middle pretty well. It's easier to fill the middle in later. Okay, and there we go. And that topping will sink into the cake a little bit as it bakes. So there we go. That's ready to go in the oven. I'm going to pop it in here. At 350, I'm going to bake this for about 40 minutes. But like most cakes, you can use a knife or a toothpick when it's getting close to done. If something says 40 minutes, I like to set it for like 35 first and check on it. Especially because my oven is pretty new and I haven't, learned yet its little quirks if it runs a little cool or a little hot. So I'd rather check things a little bit on the early side just to be safe. But we'll check back in with this in about 35 minutes. Okay, about 37 minutes later, and I just checked on this a minute ago, so I'm pretty sure it's done. I'm getting a clean toothpick out of there. So, our cake is good to go. Turn my oven off. And this will need to sit and cool for just a little bit before you would want to cut it. Doesn't that look tasty? But it is good served warm. It doesn't need to cool all the way, though it's fine cold as well. But if I tried to cut it right now, it would be too hot and just crumble, though that wouldn't affect the taste. So that's a chocolate applesauce cake. Gonna eat some of that for dinner when I got a friend coming over here shortly. Thanks for watching, folks. If you're interested in more info on my off-grid tiny house life, check out some of my other videos here. And if you like what you're seeing, click the little picture of my house to subscribe and then hit the little bell so YouTube actually notifies you every time there's a new video available. See y'all next time.